So, good morning, students. So, welcome you all to another session. So, let's begin today's session. Right. So, we have been studying with we have been discussing with the topic called structural organization in animals, and in that we have taken up with the last part of the chapter, which is called the frog. Right. So, we've been talking about the structural organization in frogs, and in frogs also we have come to the last part of the frog, which is nothing but the reproductive system as well as the excretory system that is actually being discussed. Right. So in the previous session, we have completed with the circulatory system as well as the nervous system in case of frog. So today, let's take up with the last parts, which is the excretory system as well as the reproductive system in case of frog. So as I've already mentioned in the previous session, that in case of male frog, the excretory system as well as the reproductive system is actually said to be connected with each other. So therefore, we would start calling it as a common urinogenital system in case of the male frogs. Whereas in case of female frogs, there is no internal connection between the excretory system as well as the reproductive system. So female frog part will take up separately. So we'll take up first with the male reproductive system. That is nothing but the male urinogenital system, where there is an internal association or internal connection between the excretory system as well as the reproductive system in these organisms. Fine. So let's begin today's topic by taking up with something called as the urinogenital system in case of frog, the male frog. So in frog, so we'll be taking up first with the male reproductive system, and in male we will start calling it as the common urinogenital system. Right? So we have this urinogenital system. Right? Okay, so talking about the urinogenital system, so as I've already mentioned, so it is a common system for both the excretory system as well as the reproductive system in these organisms. That's the reason why we start calling it as urinogenital system. Urino with regards to the excretory system, genital with regards to the reproductive system. So as I've already mentioned, there is an internal connection between the excretory system as well as the reproductive system. Now, the major excretory organs in these organisms are nothing but kidneys. The primary sex organs in case of males is nothing but the testis. So as I've already mentioned, the excretory system as well as the reproductive system are said to be interconnected with each other. That means the kidneys and the testis both are said to be connected with each other. So let us see how exactly they are connected and how does this urinogenital system function in these organisms. Right? So let us first start with the kidneys. So these organisms have a pair of kidneys which are said to be long oval-shaped kidneys, large oval-shaped kidneys. So they have a pair of kidneys, right? So large oval-shaped kidneys. So this would be the kidneys, right? So they have a large oval-shaped kidneys are actually present here in these organisms, right? A pair of kidneys. On the anterior end of the kidneys, there are these fat bodies which are being present, right? So all this would be the fat bodies which are present towards the anterior end of the kidneys. Right. Now, attached to the kidneys, there is a pair of testes being present. Right. So testis is actually seen over the kidneys, and they are said to be attached with that of the kidneys. But here, when we are doing the diagram, I'm just showing it slightly aside so that we start understanding the connection between the testis as well as the kidneys. But actually speaking, it is not here. Right. The testis is not here. The testis is actually said to be present over the kidneys. Right, so this would be the testis. So they have a pair of testes, right? So a pair of kidneys, a pair of testes, and this testis is said to be attached to that of the kidneys. Right. Now we know kidneys are the prominent excretory organs in these organisms where the filtration of the nitrogenous waste actually happens. Testis is the site where the sperms are actually being formed. So the formation of sperms usually happens in the testis. Now what exactly is happening? As I've already said, testis and kidneys are both said to be interconnected with each other. So how are they interconnected? So testis and kidneys both are said to be interconnected with each other through these small canals which would run into the testis, into the kidneys. So from the testis, certain small canals, they would actually open up into the kidneys, right? So these canals or these ducts, we would start calling them as the vasa efferentia. So vasa efferentia arises from the testis, and this vasa efferentia opens up into the kidneys, right? So it would open up actually into the inside the kidneys, they would actually open up. Now, what is the role of vasa efferentia? So vasa efferentia is the one which is responsible for the transportation of sperms from the testis into the kidneys. Right. Now, how many vasa efferentia are present in each of the kidneys, or how many vasa efferentia arise from each of the testes? It is said to be approximately 10 to 12. Right. So there are approximately 10 to 12 vasa efferentia arising from each of the testes, which would open up into the kidneys. Now, as I've already said, testis and kidneys are said to be attached with each other. So how exactly they are attached? They are attached with the help of a double membrane peritoneum, right, which would hold the testis with that of the kidneys. So this would be the double membrane peritoneum that is present, which would hold which would start attaching the testis with that of the kidneys. And this double membrane peritoneum, what we have drawn here, is called as the mesothelium. Right, so this is one important term what you need to remember, right? So mesothelium is a double membrane peritoneum which would hold the testis on top of the kidneys, or which would hold the testis on the kidneys, right? So this is the connection that is actually being created. Because of this, the testes are actually said to be held over the kidneys, right? So this is what we have. Now, what exactly is happening? All these vasa efferentia, once they open up into the kidneys, inside the kidneys, all the vasa efferentia would be connected with each other, right? They would combine with each other. So all vasa efferentia would actually combine with each other to form a common duct, right? So all the vasa efferentia that is present, they would combine with each other to form a common duct. So this would be the common duct that is actually present. So they would combine with each other to form this common duct. And this common duct is called as, this is one important duct, it is called the Bidder's canal. Right? So Bidder's canal, one very important duct what you need to remember. Right? So what exactly is this Bidder's canal or the Bidder's duct? All the vasa efferentia, once they enter inside the kidneys, or once they open up inside the kidneys, all of the vasa efferentia will be connected with each other to form a common duct or common canal, which is called as the Bidder's canal. Right? So what exactly is happening? Once the sperms are formed in the testis, from the testis, the sperms pass on through the vasa efferentia. From the vasa efferentia, they move on inside the kidneys or into the kidneys, and into the kidneys, they would enter into this particular canal or the duct called as the Bidder's canal. Okay, so this is what, keep it. Now let us keep this aside for some time. Right. Now let us get into the excretory part. So excretory system, we said that the prominent organ is nothing but the kidneys. So inside the kidneys, there are several structural and functional units which are called as nephrons, which are being present. Now these nephrons are the ones which are responsible for filtration of the blood, such that all that nitrogenous waste that is present in the body will be filtered, and all that nitrogenous waste will now be passed on into another canal that is present inside the kidneys. Right? So this is the canal. So all the nitrogenous waste will actually be poured into this particular canal, right? The urinary canal, right? So this canal and the Bidder's canal, both are actually said to be interconnected with each other, right? So the canal which bears the urine as nitrogenous waste, as well as the Bidder's canal, both are said to be interconnected with each other through the transverse connections, right? And then at the posterior end of the kidney, both these canals would combine with each other, right? So both these canals would actually combine with each other to form a common duct, right? So they would combine together to form a common duct, and this common duct is actually referred to as the urinogenital duct, right? It is referred to as the urinogenital duct. Okay, so a common duct for the passage of the nitrogenous waste, a common duct for the passage of the sperm. Therefore, we would start calling it as a common urinogenital duct. Right. Now, this urinogenital duct opens up into another structure. Right. It will open up into another structure, and this structure is nothing but the rectum. right? So the urinogenital duct would open up into the rectum. And this rectum would open to the outside through the opening that is present here. And this opening is nothing but the cloaca. Right? So the cloaca is being formed. So from this side also, the same thing would arise. So another duct would actually come from this place, which would actually open up into the rectum here. Right? It will open up into the rectum. Right? So both the urinogenital ducts, they actually open up into this structure, which is called as the rectum. So what exactly is happening now? So this sperms which are formed in the testis, right? From the testis, the sperms move on into the vasa efferentia. From the vasa efferentia, they would actually move on into something called as the Bidder's canal. They enter inside the kidneys. Inside the kidneys, they will open up into this common duct, which is called as the Bidder's canal. So how is the Bidder's canal formed? It is formed by the fusion of all of the vasa efferentia. So all the vasa efferentia inside the kidneys, they would combine together to form a common canal or a duct, which is called as the Bidder's canal. On the other side, we have another duct which arises from the kidneys, where all the nitrogenous waste which is being filtered by the nephrons will be poured into that particular duct. So that duct bearing the nitrogenous waste as well as the Bidder's canal, both of them combine together to form a common duct which is called as the urinogenital duct. And this urinogenital duct would open up into this structure which is called the rectum. So rectum we have already discussed when we were talking about the digestive system. So we said that the last part of the alimentary canal, which we started calling it as the large intestine, is nothing but the rectum. So we said that when we were talking about the digestive system, I told you that all the undigested food will be passed on into the rectum after its digestion and absorption in the small intestine. Whatever undigested food is there, that undigested food will now be passed on into the rectum. And from the rectum, through the cloaca, which is said to be a common opening, the undigested food is actually sent out of the body. So here also the same thing. The nitrogenous waste from this canal will pass on again into the or outside the kidneys through into the urinogenital duct. From the urinogenital duct, the nitrogenous waste enters into the cloaca, into the rectum. And once it enters into the rectum, there is actually another small sac-like structure that is actually being present here. A larger sac-like structure that is present. And this larger sac-like structure, we will start calling it as the urinary bladder. So the nitrogenous waste, as it enters into the urinogenital duct, from the urinogenital duct, it would actually be stored in this sac-like structure called the urinary bladder. And from the urinary bladder, the nitrogenous waste will be excreted out again through the cloaca in the form of urine. Right? So the cloaca is acting as a common opening for the excretory system as well. The third, the sperms from the testis, which are formed in the testis, which would pass through the vasa efferentia. From the vasa efferentia, it would enter into the Bidder's canal. From the Bidder's canal into the urinogenital duct. From the urinogenital duct, and from the rectum, it would actually be sent out of the body through the cloaca. Okay, right? So that's what we said, that cloaca is said to be a common opening for three systems, right? So one is the digestive system, through which the undigested food is actually be sent out of the body. Second one, we said that cloaca is said to be a common opening for the second system, which is the excretory system, through which the nitrogenous waste is actually sent out of the body. Again, the same passage what we have just said now. The third system, I told you that cloaca is considered to be the common opening for the reproductive system, where the gametes are actually sent out of the body. So here we can see the sperms are also being sent out of the body through the cloaca. So that's the reason why we say cloaca is considered to be a common opening for three systems: the digestive system, excretory system, as well as the reproductive system. Right? So this is what we have with the male reproductive system in case of frogs. Right? So we call it as a common urinogenital system. The reason why we call it as urinogenital system is because the testis and the kidneys both are said to be interconnected with each other, and the testis opens up inside the kidneys through the structures called as vasa efferentia. And one important thing what we need to remember whenever we talk about the male reproductive system or the urinogenital system in case of frog is one, mesorchium, which is said to be a connection or attachment between the testis and the kidneys. And the second one is this Bidder's canal, what you need to remember. A common duct which is formed by the fusion of all of these vasa efferentia inside the kidneys. Right? So where do we have the Bidder's canal? It is actually present inside the kidneys. Fine. So this is what we have with the urinogenital system in case of the male frog. Right. So with this we have done with the male frog. Now let us take up with the female frog. the urinogenital system in case of, sorry, in case of female, we don't call it as urinogenital system because as there is internal connection between the testis and the kidneys, here in case of the female system, there is no internal connection being present. So the female reproductive system is said to be separate, as well as the excretory system also is said to be separate. So we don't call it as the urinogenital system. Now, let us take up with the reproductive system in case of the female frog. Right, the reproductive system in case of the female frog. Again, whenever we talk about the reproductive system in case of female frog, we usually talk about the kidneys first, because the primary sex organs in case of females are nothing but ovaries. So ovaries are actually situated, or they are located right on top of the kidneys. So let us draw the kidneys first. So this would be the pair of kidneys, what is actually present in these organisms. Right, so this would be the pair of kidneys that are present. Right, a pair of kidneys. On top of the kidneys, we know that there are these fat bodies that are present. Right, we have already seen this. Right, so there are these fat bodies present on top of the kidneys. Right, now on the kidneys, right on the kidneys, there is a pair of larger structures which are called as the ovaries. Right, so there is a pair of large structures which are actually called as the ovaries. Right, so this would be the ovaries that are actually present. Right, and here also let me draw one more. So this would be a pair of ovaries that is actually being present, right? So a pair of larger structures called the ovaries is actually present right on top of the kidneys. Again, just like how the testis and the kidneys are attached with each other with the help of a double membrane peritoneum called mesorchium, here also the ovaries and kidneys are again attached with the help of a double membrane peritoneum. So I'm just showing it this way. Right, they are attached to with the help of a double membrane peritoneum, and this double membrane peritoneum we would actually start calling it as the mesovarium. So this is one more important thing what you need to remember. In case of males, the connection between the testis and the kidneys is mesorchium. In case of females, the connection between the ovaries and the kidneys is nothing but the mesovarium. So mesorchium in case of males, mesovarium in case of females. Okay, now let us talk first about the excretory system, then we'll talk about the reproductive system. Right. So talking about excretory system, the kidneys we know, we have already seen that, right? So kidneys consist of the structural and functional units which are called as the nephrons. So in the nephrons, there is filtration of the nitrogenous waste actually happen. So all the nitrogenous waste that is actually present here or formed in this particular kidneys will now be passed on through the duct, which is called as the ureter. Right? So this would be the duct through which the excretory waste would actually be passed on. Right? So this duct, you start calling it as the ureter. Right. So this ureter, now it would open up into this another structure. As we have already seen this, it would open up into this sac-like structure, which we call it as the rectum, which is the large intestine part of the alimentary canal. So the ureters will open up into the rectum. Now remember, here in case of males, we are calling it as the urinogenital duct or the urinogenital tract. But here we are simply calling it as ureters because it is nowhere connected with that of the reproductive system. So from this side also, there would be another duct which would actually arise, another ureter which would actually open up into the rectum here. Right? So the urine is being brought by the kidneys through the ureters into the rectum. And again, as we have already seen here, in the rectum, there is this large sac-like structure which is actually present. And the sac-like structure, we started calling it as the urinary bladder. So they have the urinary bladder. So all the urine from the ureter or the nitrogenous waste from the ureter will be passed on into this large sac-like structure called the urinary bladder, and the urine would be stored in the urinary bladder. So from the urinary bladder, it would be excreted out through this opening that is present, and this opening we started calling it as the cloaca. Right? It would open up into the cloaca. Yeah. So this is what we have with the excretory system in case of the female reproductive system, or the excretory system in case of female frog. Now talking about the reproductive system in case of female frog. So as I've already said, there is no internal connection between the ovaries as well as the kidneys. There are additional structures which are present, which are a part of the reproductive system. So what are those additional structures? Right on top of this ovaries, right on top of the ovaries, there is a funnel-like structure which is actually present. Right. So this funnel-like structure is called the oviducal funnel. Oviducal funnel, right? So this oviducal funnel is lined by ciliated epithelium. So we know what would be the function of it. As and when the ovaries starts releasing the ovum, right? So as and when the ovaries starts releasing the ovum, what happens is the oviducal funnel will start absorbing those ovum from that is being released from the ovaries. And that ovum, which is absorbed or taken up or collected by the oviducal funnel, will now be passed on through this duct that is present. And this duct would be called the oviduct. Right? It would be called the oviduct. Now, this oviduct would open up into the rectum. So before it opens into the rectum, it will be slightly swollen, and then it would actually open up into the rectum here. Right? It would actually open up into the rectum. So this is how it is being present. So this side also, there would be one funnel, right, which would actually collect the ovum. And then once they collect the ovum, it would be passed on into this particular duct, which is called the oviduct. And this oviduct will be slightly swollen at the base before it opens up into the rectum. And it would be opened here into the rectum. So this would again be the oviduct. What exactly is happening here is, as and when the ovaries starts releasing the ovum, right? So as and when the ovaries starts releasing the ovum, the oviducal funnel will start collecting the ovum from the ovaries, and it would pass on through the oviduct. From the oviduct, it would be entering, or it would enter into the rectum, and from the rectum, it will be actually sent out of the body through this opening called as the cloaca. Again, here also, cloaca acting as a common opening for three systems: the digestive system, and here would be the excretory system, as well as the reproductive system in case of the female organs. Yeah, so this is what we have with the female reproductive system as well as the female excretory system, where both the systems are actually said to be separate, not like that as seen in case of the male system, where the excretory system as well as the reproductive system both are said to be the same. Right? So this is what we have with the urinogenital system in case of the male organisms, the excretory as well as the reproductive system in case of the female organism. Right? Now, talking about the excretion little bit more. Right? So what is the type of nitrogenous waste that is being excreted by these organisms? So the nitrogenous waste excreted by these organisms is the adult frog. The adult frog, so they are actually said to be ureotelic. So we are very much familiar with what we mean by ureotelic organisms, right? So ureotelic refers to organisms which would excrete urea. So the adult frog, they are said to be ureotelic because they would excrete urea, while the larva, that is the tadpole larva, right? So the larvae, they are said to be ammonotelic. Right? So the larvae is said to be ammonotelic. That means the larvae would excrete ammonia, while the adult frog would excrete urea. Now, why is larvae ammonotelic and adult ureotelic? Because we know that larvae is actually present in the water. Larvae is said to be aquatic organism, right? Since it is aquatic, we know that the organisms which do not have or which can spend enough of water for the excretion of ammonia, they are said to be ammonotelic. But those organisms who cannot spend so much of water for excretion of ammonia, they convert themselves into either ureotelic or uricotelic. Here, since the adult frog is said to be a terrestrial form, so they cannot tend to waste so much of water just for the excretion of ammonia. As a result of which, their excretory product would be converted into urea before it is actually excreted to the ocean. Right? So the larvae, they are said to be ammonotelic, while the adult frogs, they are said to be ureotelic organisms. Right? So this is what we have with the reproductive system in case of the frog, the male and female frog, as well as the excretory system in these organisms. Right? So with this, we have completely done with the topic, the anatomy in case of frog. One more last topic before we wind up with frog, which is nothing but the process of copulation, fertilization, and the process of development in frogs. So talking about the process of copulation first. Copulation is nothing but the process of mating. So we know that these organisms are active during the rainy season. So the process of mating also usually occurs only during the rainy season. Because we have already seen this, right? During the peak summer and peak winter, they would go into a state of inactiveness, right? So we spoke about this when we were talking about morphology also. They would enter into a state of inactiveness. They enter into something called as summer sleep as well as winter sleep, estivation, hibernation. So all that we have seen. So only during the rainy season, these organisms would actually come out. Right. So during the process of breeding or mating, what exactly happens is these organisms, they actually move on into the water, because we know that, as I've already said in the first session itself, when we were talking about the introduction or the morphology, amphibia, I told you that, and the word amphibia refers to organisms which are dependent on water for the process of fertilization. So, sorry, for the process of reproduction. So all those organisms which require water for reproduction, or they are completely dependent on water for reproduction, those organisms we have classified them under amphibia. Now, because of that reason, they are able to survive in water as well as land. So dual life, that's how the term amphibia actually came into picture. Now, during the process of mating or copulation, both of these organisms, the male organisms and female organisms, we just saw, right? They are said to be sexually dimorphic organisms. Male organisms have their own sex organs, female organisms also have their own sex organs. So just before the process of mating or copulation, both of these organisms will enter into the water, or they'll start moving into the water from the land. So what exactly is happening? During the rainy season, the male organisms first will start giving some sort of a sound, the croaking sound. We discussed about this, right? I told you that males have vocal cords present in the junction between the head and the trunk. So with the help of those vocal cords, they would start giving some sort of sound, which we start calling it as the croaking sound. So because of this croaking sound, or this croaking sound would be heard by the female organism, the female frog, and the female frog will come to the place where the male frog is present. Right. So once the male frog and the female frog come close together, what would happen next? The male frog will start mounting on the posterior end of the female frog. Get it? The male frog will start mounting on the posterior end of the female frog. So, and the male frog will start holding the female frog tightly with the help of one of the copulatory organs. You remember, which we started calling it as the copulatory pads or the nuptial pads. Remember that? We spoke about this when we were talking about morphology also. I told you that in case of male organisms, right, in the 4 limbs of the male organisms, I told you that 4 limbs have only 4 digits. At the base of the first digit, right, in case of male frogs, there is a copulatory structure called as the nuptial pad or the copulatory pad, which is being present. So with the help of this copulatory pad or the nuptial pad, the male frog will start holding the female frog tightly. Once this happens, right, once this happens, the male frog will start releasing the sperms. The female frog will start releasing the sperms. Right. Now, one important thing what you need to remember, right? So the male frog will start releasing the sperms, and the female frogs will start releasing the eggs. One important thing here is the sperms and the eggs, they are actually released simultaneously. Right? This is one more important thing what you need to remember, right? So the sperms and the eggs will be released simultaneously inside the water. Right. Now, since the sperms and the eggs are released simultaneously, the extent of fertilization would actually be more. Now, why should they be released simultaneously? A question might arise. Why should the eggs and the sperm be released simultaneously? Again, remember, where they are releasing the eggs and sperms, it is in water. We know that sperms are said to be highly motile structures, while the female eggs are said to be immotile. So there is no problem with the eggs. As and when the eggs are released into the water, they would actually be staying in that particular place, most of the cases, unless and until the water current is said to be more. But in case of sperms, if we see, since they are said to be highly motile, they would start swimming in water and they would go to a distant place. As a result of which, the extent of fertilization will become lower. Sometimes the fertilization may not occur also. So to prevent that, again, both the eggs and sperms, they will be released simultaneously, such that the extent of fertilization between the sperms and the eggs will start increasing to a higher extent. Right. Now, since the process of fertilization, that is the fusion of male gamete and the female gamete, the sperms and the eggs, occurs outside the body of the organism, we would start calling such type of fertilization as the external fertilization. So the type of fertilization here would be the external fertilization. And when we say external fertilization, where exactly is this fertilization taking place? It is taking place in water. Right? Now, after the process of fertilization, so what exactly is happening? After the process of fertilization, there is formation of zygote happening. So a zygote is being formed. Right. Now this zygote will now start undergoing the process of development. Right. So the zygote will now start undergoing the process of development. As a result of development, the zygote will start leading to the formation of a larval stage. Right. There is formation of larva happen. And that larva here, we will start calling it as a tadpole larva. So this is the name that is actually given to the larva. Now, a few characters of the tadpole larva. Number one, the tadpole larva, right? The tadpole larva is said to be aquatic in nature. Right? So the tadpole larva is said to be aquatic. Now, why tadpole larva is aquatic? Because we just saw that the fertilization takes place in water. So for first initial development of the organisms also takes place in water. So since the initial development takes place in water, larva is said to be aquatic in nature. Right. Second, since larva is said to be aquatic in nature, they would start using some sort of a respiratory organs since they are aquatic in nature. So we have already seen this, right, when we were talking about the process of respiration. Right? I told you that these organisms, they have gills as the respiratory organs, and I also told you in which part of the life cycle they use gills as the respiratory organ during the larva stage. Now, since the tadpole larva is said to be aquatic, they would start respiring with the help of gills. Right. The third thing of larva is here. The third thing of larva is now since they are again aquatic, they would start excreting ammonia and they would be ammonotelic. So we just saw that. Right? So we've just seen that. So the tadpole larva is said to be ammonotelic. So they would start excreting ammonia because they are actually said to be aquatic in nature. And the fourth thing is now since they are again aquatic, they would have a very well developed tail. So the tail is said to be a highly developed structure in case of larva. Right? So these four characters you need to remember about the larva of this organism, larva of the frog, that is the tadpole larva. So the tadpole larva is said to be aquatic. They would start respiring with the help of gills. They are said to be ammonotelic. They would start excreting ammonia and they would start moving. So the locomotion of these tadpole larva would be with the help of tail. So they have a very well developed tail. Right. Now this larva will now again undergo the process of metamorphosis. It will start undergoing the process of development, right? As a result of which it would lead to the formation of an adult organism. So the adult frog is finally formed after the process of metamorphosis. Right. Now the characters or the morphological, the characters of the larva and the adult is said to be highly different. Right. So the morphological features of the adult as well as the larva is actually said to be different. So morphologically, they are said to be very different. So what are the characters? Same thing if you see here, it would be quite opposite in case of the adult organism. We can start making a note of that also. The adult larva was aquatic, but larva, after it is completely developed into an adult organism, it would move on into the land and therefore it would start becoming terrestrial. Right? It would start becoming terrestrial. The first one. The second one, larvae which was aquatic started respiring with the help of gills. But here in the adult organisms, since they moved on into the lands, gills will start becoming non-functional and the gills will be highly reduced. Gills would be highly reduced. Now, if gills are reduced, how would they start undergoing the process of respiration? So we have already seen this. They would start using either the skin for the process of respiration, or they would start using the buccopharyngeal cavity, or they would start using the lungs for the process of respiration. So we have already discussed about this when these organisms would use skin for respiration, when they use buccopharyngeal cavity, as well as when they would use lungs for the process of respiration. So during the transformation of larva into the adult, during the metamorphosis of larva into the adult, the gills, which were highly developed in case of the larva, will be highly reduced in case of the adult organism. Third, larva, we said that they were said to be ammonotelic. But as these organisms started moving from the water into the land, the mode of nitrogenous waste or the nitrogenous waste to be excreted would be again transformed from ammonia to urea. So they would become ureotelic organisms. They would become ureotelic organisms. Right. Next one. The tail, we said that it is said to be highly developed in case of the larva. But during the transformation of larva into an adult organism, the tail would be highly reduced. Right. So the tail would be highly reduced in these organisms. Yeah, so these are the morphological, just a few morphological differences to name between the larva as well as the adult organism, right? So aquatic organisms, terrestrial. Larva is said to be aquatic, adult organism, terrestrial. Larva respires through gills, adult organisms, gills are said to be highly reduced. Larva, they are ammonotelic, adult organisms, they start converting the nitrogenous phase from ammonia into urea. In case of larva, the tail is highly developed, but in case of adult, the tail is highly reduced. The tail is not seen in the adult organism. So this is the differences this is the changes that usually happens in these organisms during the process of development. Now, what sort of a development is it? Since there is an involvement of a larval stage here, we would start calling such type of development as indirect development. So the type of development here is said to be called an indirect development. So indirect development, we are very much familiar with it, right? So if any organisms have a larval stage, intermediate larval stage during the process of development, we would start calling such type of development as an indirect development. Right. One more important thing what you need to remember here is with regards to the process of metamorphosis. So the type of metamorphosis that is shown in these organisms, that is the frogs, we would actually start calling it as retrogressive metamorphosis. Retrogressive metamorphosis. So we usually have two types of metamorphosis. One we call it as progressive metamorphosis, and the other one is called retrogressive metamorphosis. So what happens in progressive metamorphosis is there is gradual changes during the process of development. From the larva to the adult, gradually the changes would be, right? And less advanced characters would be present in the larva and highly advanced characters would be present in the adult organism. So that would be the normal gradual changes if it is seen. We would start calling such type of metamorphosis as the progressive metamorphosis, as we have seen in case of cockroaches. If you remember, we said that cockroaches undergo molting 13 times. And during these 13 molts, gradually some sort of changes will be seen in each of the changes, and the development will be from very less characters to the most advanced characters. So such type of metamorphosis, we would actually start calling it as progressive metamorphosis. But here we are calling it as retrogressive metamorphosis. So retrogressive metamorphosis refers to that in the larval stage, the advanced characters are seen, but in the adult organisms, the characters are said to be highly reduced. One such example we can take with regards to the tail. So tail is actually said to be an advanced character, which was predominantly seen in the larval stage, while that advanced character, which was predominantly seen in the larval stage, would be highly reduced in the adult organism. So what does that mean? Larva has advanced characters, while the adult has the less advanced characters or the primitive characters. So if that is the metamorphosis which is happening in this way, where larva has advanced characters and the adult organism has less advanced characters, such type of metamorphosis we would start calling as the retrogressive metamorphosis, right? So these three things you need to remember whenever we talk about the frog part, right? So the process of fertilization is said to be external fertilization because it takes place outside the body of the organism. Second one, development is said to be indirect development because there is a larval stage involved in the process of development. And the third, the type of metamorphosis is said to be a retrogressive metamorphosis, which is usually seen in these organisms, especially with regards to the character called the tail. Highly advanced character in the larval stage, less advanced character in the adult organism, right? So this is what we have in the organism called as frog, right? So with this, we have completed with another chapter, which is called structural organization in animals, right? So in the next session, let us take up with the next chapter. We'll enter into the human physiology part. So under human physiology, we'll start taking up with the first chapter, which is the human digestive system, right? Thank you.